My name is Ian. I come from Scania, and together with my colleague from our partner Celonis here, we're going to, I think, mainly remind you of some old truths, unfashionable truths, and bring them into this way more fashionable space of AI. And we titled it Autonomous Processes, how Scania and Celonis takes PI, process intelligence that is, to artificial intelligence. So let's go on. I mentioned Scania. I hope most of you or all of you are aware of our beautiful company up north. But if you aren't, we manufacture trucks, buses, power systems or engines in a wide variety of applications. And with our big but even growing service portfolio, we are truly a transport solution provider. So just some key points here. Founded already in 1991, 100 countries. We have commercial presences. Last read figures, 1934. I think that is quite unique. And we are usually on the more comfortable end on those double digits when it comes to the operating margin. Insofar, I have had at all an effect on that, a positive effect on that long history. It's been around this topic, process automation. We usually define it by trying to ask two types of questions. What is process? How do we improve process? And then the other one is a technology question. What technologies do we use to improve process? And eventually, as a last step, automate it. And my organization that runs this for Scania sits in the IT part of Scania. And I only mention that because that usually make people think that we exclusively focus on the technology part. But as you can hear from my sarcastic tone, we are not. We rather, our purpose really comes from focusing on process excellence, to improve the way Scania create and deliver value to its customers, and also the owner group of Scania, Traton. So the unit of interest is process. Technology is, of course, very important still, but it's a secondary thing. Yeah, exactly. That's one way of putting technology second, and then all of a sudden the gods are against you. Okay, there we go. It's very slow still, but let me take... Okay, yeah, let's go. So still second, even though the gods are against us 2 times now. The point is, what I'm trying to make is that we don't define, or we don't start from an externally or even internally defined technology toolbox. We look at Scania and Scania's specific needs, contextualized for Scania, and how it can have a global impact on process excellence. So it needs to be modular in a very Scania-specific way. There we go. And process focus and modularity with a modular approach might not be, as I said, the very original old truths. And even more so at Scania is probably the 2 main success factors for our longevity. For modularity already from the 40s, so if you don't know, you can basically order billions of versions of a Scania truck. There is no model. It's tailored to the performance of what the application is needing. And flow focus really from our collaboration with Toyota in the 90s to scale this up. So it's very standard in Scania. But then something happened, and I think it's a very familiar story for all of us. There we go. The pandemic, war, not really natural disasters, but certain phenomena that happened to play a big role, especially for Scania in the supply chains. Basically the world upside down. And it was very clear for us that we had lost our way when it comes to process focus and flow. So in 2023, our CEO made it very clear that end-to-end flow is not really just priority number 1, but 2 and 3 going forward. And that was very good for me, because that meant that we could go out with a little bit more mandate, a little bit more budget, and search for new partners. And here we are. We found Celonis, not just honestly a revolutionizing type of toolbox, but also an even more interesting partner that sees process in the same way as we do, not as a prescription of how work should be done, but as a living thing that we can go and explore together if the clicker would allow for it. And this is, for those who are not very familiar with process intelligence, sort of the main deliverable when we talk about process intelligence, to build this digital twin of your process landscape. Not just following one object in the flow, but comparing the flow of the sales order to the production order, to a purchase order for certain material, even to the invoice, and see how it all connects together. In order to, of course, be in a post sense, analyze your flow problems, but also have way more predictive power in the flow while it's happening to do something about red flags. And we will come back to that later. And just as a very high summarization, we started, I think our pilot agreement was signed 20 months ago or something. And since then we have, I think it's 13 million euro now in combined value that we have realized and validated by our business side, just from the first 2 cases. And it's mainly P&L savings and cash flow improvements. But more importantly, I think, is the adoption part. So for those who don't know, you sort of start by process area per process area. That's also the price model that Celonis have, which I really like. So we started in the accounts payable in finance, into procurement, and now we have a digital twin from procure to pay. It doesn't cover every single process step, but everything that we have system support for, we have in the digital twin. Then we went into R&D. We have just started there, and we also have as part of our assembly line, the gearbox assembly. And then to those who are manufacturing companies will be well aware about this, the most complex area, inventory management and inbound logistics. A crazy complex area, especially if you have a lot of homegrown policies, systems, and everything attached to that core process. And now into outbound and into order delivery, where we're focusing heavily 2026. And we will come back to that. So a lot of work is going on, a lot of parallel things happening, and everything is happy-go-lucky. But the Scania sort of revitalization on process was not the only thing that happened in 2023, or actually in end of 2022. I think we all got familiar with this thing, the juggernaut that you sort of need to talk about. I was at least sitting there in January 23 and thinking, holy shit, this is way better than I thought. Could generative models really perform this well when it comes to full sentences, seemingly reasoning about the questions that I'm putting across it? So while we were having this revitalization of process, software world once again spit something out to say, well, you don't need to think about that. Here is a black box. If you can add task automation into this, goal orientation, a little bit more orchestration, and just feed it with endless data, then it will do all the operations for you, more or less. I mean, I think we all remember it like that. And a lot of good things, I think, come out from ChatGPT and other generative models. I'm very proud how Scania have sort of rolled it out. More than 8,000 enterprise licenses, I think, being used daily. But it hasn't revolutionized business, if we're honest. At least not in our company. And I haven't seen any other company that's been totally revolutionized by it. So there is a problem here. And there are many ways to talk about that problem. But I think Celonis made the best summarization of it all. If we can see the next page. Because this is basically Celonis' own summarization of the problem, and I think it's really capturing all parts of it. So on the one hand, yes, AI needs data, especially agentic AI needs a lot of data, but it needs specific type of data. It needs data to make it understand your business. And that could be a lot of different things, if we are honest. You can build the best knowledge graph possible, I mean, with a lot of relationships between data products and all of that. And then have that under control. But better would be to have a process landscape fully digitalized, fully in a digital twin format that you can see live data day to day how it's performing. Because then you have all the context you need for the AI. And the second part is be deployed strategically. And that basically means that although it makes sense that these generative models have been trying to revolutionize personal productivity, and I think that's what it should continue doing, there is a lot of AI usage that is not leading to any value addition. I mean, asking your ChatGPT about funny icebreakers before a workshop is not really a good use of AI, because if it's not costly for a company, it's certainly costly for the planet. So sooner or later, the money will run out. It's a zero-sum game, even if the banks don't think it is. And when it comes to that, you need to have won the race by deploying it on your very most important problems. And how do you know which problems are your most important problems? Well, I think looking at process intelligence and the graph. And then the last point here is working with everything else. That is basically meaning that we are not just AI ready on this stage. If we were totally starting from a blank sheet, I think many of us could build up a whole new environment around the agentic AI and it would work quite well. But we are a 130-year-old company. We have self-developed systems everywhere in the flow. We have system transformation ongoing, different maturity on data, everywhere in the organization, distributed mandate. I mean, and then on top of that, thousands of applications. And humans, the meat machines that are fixing everything that the IT can't fix in the flow. So if you have agents, it needs to work in that environment. It needs to function in that environment. It can't be a bespoke, siloed solution. It doesn't matter how productive it is then, because the entire flow as such will not be productive enough. And for some reason, the PowerPoint wants to keep getting to this slide, so let's stay on this slide then. Because if you don't trust me about this statement of whether process intelligence is a vital part of both AI enterprise strategy, but also agentic AI strategy, well, then apparently my ChatGPT think it is. Okay, so there is some. We all know then that we haven't got the full usage, the full value from generative and agentic AI as we probably thought now 2 years back. And we understand from hearing me speak, my preaching here, that it's all about being more process-centric in our delivery. But how is that actually done? And this is the step we are right now on with Celonis. So I'm going to try to explain it in one way here. I mean, I think you have all seen different versions of a agentic AI framework. Like, what does an agentic AI actually do? And this is just one version. But more or less, it's usually these 4 or 5 steps that I mentioned. So first, it needs to perceive. Something needs to happen. It could be a trigger, a prompt, a scheduled prompt, whatever it is. Something needs to happen. Then, obviously, there needs to be an analysis of what is happening, what is the problem, and therefore, what is the goal? Like, what is supposed to be fixed? And then plan the execution. How do I fix it? And then, of course, actually fixing it. And 5, it needs to have a context again to feed back to. The output of the bot or the agentic AI needs to go further along the flow, and there might be more agents in the flow that also need to collaborate while doing this acting part. So essentially what I'm saying is that process intelligence and the Celonis platform is absolutely vital, according to me, for these 2 first steps and the last step. And then the good part, going back to modularity again, this plan and step 3 and 4, the plan and execute. This will continuously improve from our technology providers, other technology providers that really are betting on the most avant-garde type of technologies out there. And it can just be put into the flow, because those steps will never disappear. And as an example here, we have order to delivery. This is the almost too simplified version of our order to delivery flow. But anyway, I think it serves for the purpose. We have an order being placed at the first step. You have a handover to a customer. The interesting part is that we have something in the middle, the bodybuilder. It could be multiple steps and all of that. But this is usually an external company. So we don't share data, we don't share planning. Well, we share a lot of communication, of course, but it's usually through emails and telephone. So we have been aware for a long time, but even now with Celonis, where we have more data on it, that when we're talking about problems in delivery, precision, and lead time, we're talking about minutes, hours, and days before this step. And after this step, we're talking about weeks, months, and even quarters when it comes to Scania, because every vehicle is really customized. So what can we do about this then? Well, we're doing a number of different things. But to begin with, we have now already, I think, launched our first agentic AI in this flow. Basically, the Celonis platform is monitoring what is happening, as the first perceived step. And then something changes in the order, because customers are allowed to change their orders quite a lot at Scania, because there's such a long lead time. So there's something it changed, and then we need to communicate with our bodybuilder. Is the slot still available? Or we need to push the timeline, or we need to do some change. Are we still in alignment here? That can happen through call, or it can happen through email. And that's what this agent will do. Then we are already now working on, you can say the same agent, or as a second task, or a different agent that is more or less then reconfirming later on in the flow, just before we lock the slot in our own production line, because then it's produced. To make sure that what we are producing will not just stand on the yard, it will actually go to a bodybuilder, and they are available and they're ready to work. And then free is of course to even the most, I think, ambitious step is to integrate ourselves fully with some of these bodybuilders, either through agents or through agents and other type of data sharing. And that's going to be something we started talking with some bodybuilders already. So what I'm essentially talking about is, thank you very much, is that if you have this in front of you, it is quite easy to start envision that some parts of this will become agentic. Because you've defined the black box, you define the limits of this black box, and black boxes are all fine as long as they follow some guardrails. And after they perform their activity, it's no longer a black box. You can fully see what it did and why it did it. And that's what we get from the graph. And then it's no problem to test, add, oh, it didn't work, change, add something more, add something upstream. And eventually, of course, you have a fully autonomous process. And this is not a sort of, I wouldn't even say it's a sort of a visionary, impossible step. I think we'll be here quite soon. At least in some parts of the business. And after that point, I mean, where are the humans? They are obviously guiding this, sort of a fleet manager. If you're in my commercial vehicle business, we're autonomous trucking, right? You talk about fleet managers instead of drivers all of a sudden. And then you talk about maybe letting the agents themselves be part of changing this flow in a controlled way to make it fit the purpose of the day. So, to conclude, process intelligence defines the game, the field, the rules, the black box that we're in. And this will let AI evolve from automating tasks to actually having autonomous processes. And if you like it or not, autonomous processes is the thing you should bet on. And with that, I think I'm done. My preaching is over. Yeah.
Very interesting presentation there, Ian, and gives us a lot of insights that we can dig into. Gives us a lot of insights that we can dig into now in this little conversation. We have about 10 minutes remaining, so I'm going to ask some questions and dig a little deeper to make sure that we really get the most of your knowledge here.
Let the friction begin. Oh.
Can we have both mics on at the same time?
Hello? Yeah, now again.
Perfect. Cool. So just one comment before we start the conversation. You talked about partnerships, and I just want to comment on the fact that I'm really struck by the synergy that both our companies have when it comes to these two key values you talked about, flow and modularity. Even though you are coming from a truck manufacturing background, and for us, we are a process intelligence software company, and yet at the same time, we both come to the same conclusion that building composable solutions with these repeatable building blocks that are connected together with this process framework or this flow-based framework is the way that we should be delivering products to our customers. Yeah. For me, it's just super cool to see that this is where we are today, and that's why I think we work together so well as well.
Fully agree. And I mean, it's interesting because, as I said, it's old concepts at Scania as well being revitalized by this work, I really think. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So you gave us this example of the order to delivery use case where you kind of explained a little more tangibly this 5-step agentic framework, how that maps to a real world example. Is this the only use case at Scania so far for agentic, process automation? Or do you have other use cases also, other process areas?
No, I mean, we have definitely a few already that's being worked upon. So in procurement, for example, we have what we call, I think, our cost engineering agent. So helping our purchasers really getting sort of up-to-date data on that can help them in negotiations with suppliers. And then going a bit further, because, I mean, as I said, it needs to work with everything else part. I mean, if we have this placed in an actual digital twin of the process, we can see, okay, what is happening before this? Or what is upstream to this problem, or downstream, or even adjacent to it? And that led us to go into the R&D department to start thinking about an agent for basically design review of the different components, the different material that basically eventually the supplier or the purchasers need to negotiate with the suppliers. So now that is being worked upon as a first version, a design review agent there.
Okay, so when you think of these use cases or these process areas, the way you describe the transition from procurement to R&D seems to be this expansion from one point where you say you're going upstream or you're going to an adjacent area. So if I ask you what comes next in terms of use cases, is this also how you're going to, find the next ones?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, so for us, it's become very clear that this digital twin that we talked about is inevitable and we need it no matter what. I mean, just a side point, I don't know how many of you know how price competitive commercial vehicle market is, especially trucking. People tend to think the passenger vehicle is the price competitors. No. I mean, basically a Scania vehicle, as I said, two Scania vehicles are the same, but it's been around the same price now for 20 years. A huge revolution of technology, our R&D being our biggest department, and still the same price. So our customers many times have 1-2 profit margins points. We need to make it work for them, otherwise it doesn't happen. So process is key, really, that's for sure. But then we also make a decision right now that as a company that we can't wait to roll out this fleet of agentic AI on top of our model after we have sort of completed our end-to-end graph. We need to do it while we are working on the end-to-end graph. So yes, it's a short answer to your question. We will continue working like this. So when we upload one new part of the graph, we can start looking for where should we put agents to help the flow, and also can we evaluate that they're actually valuable? Because if they're not, we're going to take them out.
Yeah.
And then put them in somewhere else to make sure that we strategically focus on the right things that we can actually affect.
Yeah, very cool, because it's even modular and composable in your approach to how you're approaching the topic. You mentioned friction. Are you ready for the friction?
Yeah, please go.
You mentioned when you showed this one slide with the visualization of how you see the future state. Everything is autonomous, all of the process lines that turn green. And then you kind of said, yeah, but don't worry, we will still have the fleet manager who's going to be human.
Yeah.
I just want to dig into that a little more. When we talk about the human workforce and the agentic workforce, why can't the fleet manager also be an agent? So where's the differentiation where you say, no, this is where the humans have the right to continue to work?
Yeah. I mean, there's a future of work is a big topic. So, I mean, you can spend a lot of time here, but I think the fortunate part for us at Scania is that, I mean, we are also trying to become an autonomous supplier in our own industry, autonomous trucking. We already have autonomous systems and solutions for the mining part and hub to hub, but we're more, of course, looking for more complex applications than that. So what I'm saying is it's quite, the psychology is there for the company to think about this in a sort of, I would say, sober and reasonable way. Because what is happening, yes, some jobs will, or roles, work tasks will become no longer needed. But we have a tendency to always find something else that the technology doesn't fix, and that's where our humans will focus on next. So the obvious first next step, I think, is that to be these fleet managers of X amount of agents running in the flow, and you sitting there with sort of control monitors in some sort of way helping it get along. But after that, if you actually have the agent doing that, of course, then there will be some other level of coordination and governance needed to take it to the next step.
Yeah.
So there will always be this sort of frontier being moved forward of where the human should be. Then to say exactly how many humans will that require? Will it be the same as today? What are the skill sets for that? Well, the only thing I know is that if you need to have this process understanding, end-to-end flow understanding, because that's the thing that I think will be integral no matter what the technology is for the future.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of one perspective of it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think I would also add that you said, we can define the game and then the agents can run the processes. But I think we're seeing that the world keeps changing, so the game will be changed. And I think the humans can define the game. When you talk about order to delivery, what happens if your business model changes? You say, I don't have a bodybuilder anymore, or my customer is different now, I'm selling to different people. Then I think the humans will be working at that level while the agents operate within the rules of the game that have been defined.
Absolutely, and you can also think about scale and adoption here. I mean, I would be very interested to hear about the first sort of couple of or more of companies trying to build a twin of their own supply chain together. Like sharing data on enough level to have a twin for at least tier 1, 2 level of supply chain. To totally visualize, not just coordination. That I think, so maybe we start seeing ecosystems competing against other ecosystems in just operational margins because of this thing. Like if you share data, we have a higher probability of being all more profitable. So I think that's another way of like seeing it. How long will you extend this scope beyond your own company's borders?
Cool, very cool. Last question for the last couple minutes that we have here. Let's say that people here in the audience are on board now. You and I were on this journey together at Scania. We're convinced. Someone else wants to try and replicate what you're doing. What would your advice be to them? Or if you put it another way, if you had to start over again tomorrow, what's the one thing you would tell yourself to work on these kind of topics?
Well, that's difficult. The second well, I would say at least, depend on what starting over means really. But for me, the key part here is, I think I have no problem being a broken record in this point, that you need to truly understand why do you need to put process as the fundamental point of interest. I think if you don't think that through really, and that is really intuitive to you, then at least you won't be able to replicate that with what we are doing. We are not a good example for you then. So I think there you really need to start thinking, what does this mean? Looking at the process as this thing. Then second of all, it's obviously it's all about timing, execution ability, all of these things that we haven't talked about now in theory and technology. And we have been very lucky to found a partner like Celonis, both on the product side and actually in our services and sort of strategic thinking on this as well. So, well, if I would do one thing, I would start working with Celonis earlier. If I'm totally honest, yes, that's probably number one thing I would do differently.
Yeah, I think the last point before the Celonis point is a good one, where I think just vision is not enough, and the methodology that we are applying to actually execute on this is key, where we talk about finding the right, strategic objectives that we're working towards, like you say, delivery precision for the customer or reducing time to market in R&D, and then working backwards to find a small manageable scope where we execute fast. We do rapid prototyping and kind of scale up from there. And I think without that piece, you can have the vision, you can have the process understanding, but nothing happens.
Exactly. So execution is, of course, a key success factor no matter what you're looking at.
Great. And I think with that, we are basically at the end of time. So thank you very much for your interest. Thank you, Ian, for all your insights. Very interesting.
Thank you, Prashant.